When 78-year-old Nelson Mandela delivered his inaugural address to the United Nations General Assembly as President of the Republic on October 3, 1994, all protocol went out the window as he received a standing ovation before uttering a word from the famed lectern.
That this august assembly is addressed for the first time in its 49 years by a South African head of state, drawn from among the African majority of what is an African country. Future generations will find it strange in the extreme that it was only so late in the 20th century that it was possible for our delegation to take its seat in the Assembly, recognized both by our people and the nations of the world as the legitimate representative of the people of our country.
Madiba, as his successors have done since, acknowledged the key role the UN played in South Africa's struggle for political freedom, including the suppression of apartheid as a crime against humanity.
We stand here today to salute the United Nations organization and its member states, both singly and collectively, for joining forces with the masses of our people in a common struggle that has brought about our emancipation and pushed back the frontiers of racism. The millions of our people say thank you and thank you again that the respect for your own dignity as human beings inspired you to act to ensure the restoration of our dignity as well.
Assuming the reins in 1999, former President Thabo Mbeki would address the Assembly on September 20th of the same year, affirming the UN Charter and pointing to the organization's supreme responsibility to work for the prevention of conflict, to affirm human dignity, and to that end, the urgent need for the meaningful restructuring of the UN.
There should be no need on the part of any country to seek to establish spheres of influence as a supposed necessary condition for the advancement of its national interests. Secondly, the very sustenance of democracy across the globe requires that in every democratic country, the ordinary people should feel that they actually do enjoy the right to determine their destiny. In other words, no country should be required to restrict its exercise of this right simply because some other, more powerful country dictates that this should be so. Thirdly, these circumstances create the possibility for a more democratic system of international governance, as would be reflected by a correct restructuring of this very organization.
I, Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma.
Former President Jacob Zuma would rise to the pinnacle of South African political power in 2009. The same year, the General Assembly adopted a resolution declaring Madiba's birthday, July 18th, Nelson Mandela International Day. An annual event steeped in community service and giving back. The country's fourth post-apartheid president also asserting the UN as the center of multilateralism globally.
The UN must continue to be at the center of multilateralism, but it needs to be reformed if it is to carry out its mandate effectively, efficiently, and transparently. We remain committed to the view that no reform of the United Nations can be complete without the fundamental reform of the Security Council.
a position that has been reiterated by every president since 1994. Also, pressing for the lifting of the embargo in Cuba and the self-determination of the peoples of Palestine and Western Sahara, with the incumbent further aligning South Africa with the UN's development agenda.
We are building a new democratic nation, united in its diversity. We are working to correct the injustices of our past and to build a society that is free, inclusive, and sustainable. We are pursuing an economic path that draws on the resources and capabilities of all our people to eradicate poverty, unemployment, and inequality. We are determined through our international relations to be a force for progress, for good, for peace, and global equality, and will continue to advance the interests of the African continent and the global South.
South Africa also served 3 two-year terms on the UN Security Council in 2007, 2011, and 2019. While in 2014, the GA established the Nelson Mandela Prize, which, every 5 years, recognizes the achievements of those who've dedicated their lives to the service of humanity.
A relationship steeped in history and bonds that will be difficult to break. As the current Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, said in 2018 at the unveiling of the statue behind me, that the fight against apartheid marked a landmark in freedom and human rights. And that while the people of South Africa deserve the credit, the United Nations also played a role, one we should all be proud of. He called Madiba a global citizen whose legacy must continue to guide us 30 years into democracy and beyond. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.